today I'm going to take you through and talk a little bit about the anabolic, catabolic cell membrane dynamic. You often hear me talk about anabolic and catabolic, and I guess it's a lot of people are quite confused, and I think still quite confused. So I thought, well, it'd be good to bring out a little video and just take you through, not only explain a little bit about why understanding cell membrane permeability and the two sides, the catabolic, anabolic, but also give you got a little experiment you can do at home, something you can do very, very simply at home to be able to get a bit of an idea whether your body is pushing more anabolic or more catabolic. And as you'll see when I take you through this video, understanding the difference can be very important indeed. Okay, if I look at the screen here, this is just taken out of my biohacking training program, and it basically outlines the 5 key control mechanisms, the healing mechanisms that I work with my testing. And we can see that the cell membrane physiology is the number 2. So it's the second most important system that I work with. Okay. Now, I'm always talking about, working in a hierarchy. Everything's about working in a hierarchy. Okay. Knowing what to do is one thing. Knowing the sequence in which to do it, in my opinion, it's where it's all at. And I think that's where a lot of people are possibly missing out here. We have to lay the groundwork. We have to open up the pathways. We have to enable the body, give it the environment it needs at that certain level to be able to actually do what it's supposed to do, and then we build up from there. And as number 2 with the cell membranes, it's very, very high up on the hierarchy, and if we don't have these cell membranes in balance, well, there's little point doing anything else. Okay, so it's a very, very important, and there's very few clients that I've ever worked with that doesn't have an issue in this area. And one of the big reasons that is so is because the cell membranes essentially are made from lipids. So it's a bilipid membrane. There's 2 different types of lipids: unsaturated runny fats and saturated, which are hard fats. And this is all about digestion. It's all about gallbladder, and it's all about dehydration, all this sort of stuff, which are very, very common things I see with a lot of clients. Okay, so it's typical. It's typical. When I see a gallbladder issue, I'm typically going to see a membrane issue. If I see a membrane issue first, I'm going to see a gallbladder issue. And if we've got gallbladder issue, we've probably got a liver issue, which means we'll probably have a pancreas issue, which means we'll probably have a sugar issue, and it all sort of flows on. Everything's connected. Okay. So what do we mean when we talk about anabolic and catabolic? Well, in the morning, we wake up in the morning, just like a petal on a flower does. Our cell membranes open up, and we go, catabolic is like breaking down. Okay, we're not building up. Cell membranes are open, oxygen's coming in, we're detoxing. The factory of life is in motion. Okay, we're creating a lot of waste and things are in motion. Now, it's not until the end of the day, just like a flower, that the flower petals close when the sun goes down. Our membranes, our membranes also close down at the end of the day. And this is when we go into the more anaerobic or anabolic phase of the day. And this is when we rebuild. Our tissues rebuild, our cells regenerate, and then when we wake up in the morning, we should be back to where we were the day before. We're very close to it anyway. Over about 100 years, we never get all the way back, and we eventually die. So it's a very, very important cycle, as you can imagine, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But yeah, it's all about breaking down and building up. I guess probably most of you would have heard about anabolic steroids and people, weightlifters, and people bulking up, taking anabolic steroids because it's build. And yeah, for them, cool, it might be okay to pound on the muscles, but it's certainly not very healthy, and you'll understand why in a minute. Okay. So the anabolic catabolic forces, look, I mentioned that just now. There's very few people I work with that does not have a catabolic or anabolic issue, and you could probably look at any condition, and especially when we start looking at things like cancer, because when we think about a cancer tumor is anaerobic in nature. It's without oxygen. Okay, so you can imagine if we have cell membranes that are pushing to anaerobic, lacking oxygen, we can start running into these sorts of problems, and I see this all the time. Okay, so they're implicated in nearly every little thing, everything that's ever going to possibly happen to you, which is why it's really important to look at, and this is why I look at it with my testing. Look, before I go any further, I just thought I'd just remember there's a little icon on the bottom right hand side of this video You can subscribe to my video channel that way. There's only a couple of videos in there right now, but I'm going to be adding to those as time goes on. So if you want to join and be kept up to date with what I'm doing and the videos I'm adding, please do that. Okay, so look, having explained how important this is, you can imagine it's pretty damn important, yeah? You'd think this is something that really we all of us need to be tested for, and all of us need to be aware of, I guess, more than anything else. Because if we can, life, there's no guarantees in life, of course. It's all about minimizing risk. We are going to get old, we are going to degenerate, but I guess the key is to be able to minimize us being in these ranges, which take us to a level where we are putting ourselves at more risk. And I guess this is part of this reason of this video, is to be able to give you a tool to be able to do that at home and get a bit of an idea anyway. Okay, as I said just now, this is all about the circadian rhythm of life, okay? Waking up in the morning, opening up, closing down at night, and rebuilding, okay? And you can imagine in nature, if we were to look at nature, and we were to think about what would happen to the environment, the natural environment outside, if the flowers didn't open. You can imagine what would happen if to the environment if the sun didn't come up tomorrow morning, or the moon didn't come up at night time. Can you imagine what would happen if the tide didn't change, if the tides went all out of whack? Okay, chaos, and this is what happens within the body too. Absolute chaos. Okay, the body's really out of whack. It's out of balance. It's using up an enormous amount of energy to try and balance that out and to maintain homeostasis. Because once we go anabolic or catabolic, we really start to push pHs around. So it creates chaos in the body, and this is chaos you do not need when obviously you're trying to get your body back into an environment where it starts to heal you. All right, I talk about this a lot about no such thing as healing. I look at this work as enabling. It's about going in and finding the obstacles to the body healing you. I mean, if you're talking to me, if I'm talking to a client, it's because you're sick. Obviously, your body is maintaining the status quo. I see my job as going in and being able to find the areas in the body that are out of balance and put them back into balance. Then, all of a sudden, the body has some energy, has some resources, where it can say, right, now I'm not fighting fires anymore. I can actually go and do some real work. Because most people are in that position where the body's just maintaining status quo, and eventually it will start going downhill. We've got to give it more resources, which means we can either try and pound healing into you, which is obviously not the way to go. It's about just enabling. It's enabling the natural healing mechanism to do the job that they want to do, because they will, if only you give it the environment to do so. Okay? That's just saying it again there, okay? Saying what will happen in our body. We'll just create hell. All right, so I'm going to talk about a simple test to gauge whether your body is pushing either to anabolic or to catabolic. Now, this isn't a scientifically proved concrete test, but look, I've done thousands of these tests. I used to have a clinic. I've worked with a lot of people one-on-one. I've got a very good idea about how accurate these sorts of things are, even though there might not be a scientific... The testing that I do has a scientific background, but the variables that I use and how I look at these sorts of things may be a little bit different. But I can tell you this is a pretty accurate indication as to whether your body is pushing one way or the other. Okay. So look, before you do this test, it's really good to just make a bit of space, be on your own, chill out for a bit, relax, and I guess get in touch with your energy, not just your physical energy, but your mental energy, your emotional energy, just how you feel. Just get a bit of a feel for where you're at, okay, without any disturbances. And also do this, I want you to do this, look, most people that are suffering either anabolic or catabolic, too far either way, they're going to be experiencing some pain in their body. Okay, so, if you've got pain, if you're more painful in the morning or more painful at night time or whatever, wait for that time. Because with this test, what we're going to do is trying to see if that pain gets better or worse, and that's going to give us an indication as to, which one it is. Okay, so chill out and don't have anyone around. Get in touch with your energy, because we're going to want to see if you can feel the difference, and it's going to happen within half an hour to an hour. Okay, so the process. Look, get some bicarb, which is very alkaline, of course. And look, most people are going to have more anabolic than catabolic. Look, anabolic is more acidic. Anabolic is lack of oxygen, it's more acidic, whereas catabolic is more alkaline. Typically it'd be more anabolic, so a lot of the pain will be acidic pain, which is why we're using bicarb as an example. If I was to use bicarb and it was typically where we had alkaline pain, I'm going to be in trouble real quick, because you're going to say, hey, you made me feel worse. Okay, as I mentioned before, just wait about 30 minutes to an hour So mix about half a teaspoon of bicarb with some water, whack it back. 1 teaspoon will be fine. Make sure you do it away from eating anything, because it will ruin digestion if you do it too soon to eating anything. So wait about 30 minutes to an hour, and just get a feel for whether this. Sometimes you will notice a difference. It will be quite radical. Sometimes it will be just like very subtle. So just just get a feel for, did I feel any different? Did that pain get a little bit better? Did anything? Just be very sensitive to any changes in your physical and mental energy. And at the end of the day, if the pain got worse and you felt a little bit more crap, it's probably what you've done. If the pain got worse and you feel like crap, you've actually added alkaline to an alkaline tissue, and you're more catabolic. Okay, if the pain got better, or you felt a slight difference and improvement in how you felt, then you would say, well, the alkalinity of the bicarb hitting the acidity of the tissues would be a sign that you're more anaerobic or anabolic, okay, acidic, because the bicarb is cancelling that out. Okay, so I mean that's essentially it. Look, one of the reasons why this testing is so important is because I think there's one out of 3 or 1 out of 2 people get cancer these days, and every cancer tumor is anaerobic in nature, lacking oxygen. Okay, it's the nature of these cancer tumors, and this is why the tissues become very acidic, because a cancer cell turns inwards because it can't get oxygen typically as a source of energy. It starts fermenting. It's called anaerobic glycolysis. It's fermenting of sugars within the cell, and it's the byproduct of those sugars that produce it's lactic acid. We burn through sugars, we create lactic acid, and this is where the acid comes from when we talk about cancer. It's not the acid coming in from outside as such, not directly anyway. It's the lactic acid produced by the cancer cell, because it's fermenting sugars within the cell because it can't get the oxygen. So you'd question, well then, what do we need to do to be able to get oxygen into the cells? And this is what chemotherapy is all about. This is why a lot of oils will work. This is why MSM can help. This is why magnesium can help. This is why unsaturated fatty acids can help, because they have an ability to be able to push those membranes more permeable and open them up. Now let's think about THC oil and cannabis oil. We all understand that cannabis oil has helped a lot of people with cancer tumors. And we have a look at the bug diet, which uses flaxseed oil and uses cottage cheese. What are these two completely different, I guess, approaches have in common? And it's the unsaturated fatty acids. I'm not saying it's just the unsaturated fatty acids that make all the difference. They certainly have a big impact, and there are obviously other properties of cannabis oil and whatnot that has that impact. But a big part of it is the fact that they're unsaturated fatty acids. They're negatively charged, and they actually switch these membranes more permeable, more open. Okay, this is what Rivisi, Dr. Emmanuel Rivisi, was famous for. Was to be able to wrap certain minerals up into lipids. This is, I guess we're talking about liposomal technology here, and actually get that lipid to deliver the lipid to the cell. And the lipid was a certain charge to be able to open that cell up, and the negative charge open that cell up and actually deliver the mineral. Very, very smart stuff. But this this is the power of understanding, how we can have such impact on, how we can have control over our cell membranes if we understand this stuff. Okay, things like magnesium will do the same thing, but magnesium will push your chemistry out if you have too much. MSM, organic sulfur, will do that quite well as well, which is why MSM is one of the protocols I would certainly recommend with anyone with a cancer tumor. So yeah, I mean, I guess another thing I'll mention is a lot of people talk about oxygen chambers and going in and people have cancer, and I just want to just emphasize the importance of understanding that getting oxygen into your bloodstream and being able to release that oxygen into the tissues and actually get it into the cells can be two different things. Okay, if our cells are pushing too anaerobic, too not permeable enough, we're going to struggle to get that oxygen into the cells. Okay, oxygen is one of the most important nutrients, obviously, that our body needs. Okay, so don't just assume just because we're getting oxygen into our bloodstream, we're actually going to get that into our tissues. There's some chemistry around that happening. I guess with the pHs as well, I'll talk about that another time. I might have mentioned it on a previous video about the ball curve effect and about the more alkaline we get, the more our blood gets, the more oxygen our blood cells can hold, but they can't actually release it. So there are some things around we need to be mindful of. And I guess if you were ever to go into an oxygen chamber, even if you didn't have cancer or whatever, and you wanted to pump your body full of oxygen, I would certainly look at something like MSM, a teaspoon or two just before you go, because it will push your membranes more open, it will make more of that oxygen available. Okay. Look, I guess at the end of the day, when we do have the cell membrane problem, I think I mentioned it before, I can't remember, but I'll repeat it anyway. We are looking at liver and gallbladder and probably the pancreas, which means we'll have sugar issues. And when we're looking at liver, we're talking MSM, we're talking beet flow. The beet flow is all about thinning the bile and making sure we get that flow. A lot of people with cell membrane issues, if you were to trace it back, you'd find a gallbladder that's probably been dehydrated for quite a long time, and bile likes to move, the gallbladder likes to work. If it gets lazy, it'll get quite lazy too, but if you get it moving, it likes to work as well. So someone that's been dehydrated for a long time, which would put a lot of people I work with are in that situation. The gallbladder's the first thing to go, and then we start having problems with the membranes, and then we have problems with everything else, as you can imagine. Okay, look, I've just made a couple of other bullet points here, some other markers that you can have a look at. You can simply do at home. Look, if you do this test and you were in some pain, you took some bicarb and you felt a little bit better, that's one marker. It's quite strong, it's quite powerful. It doesn't mean that bicarb is a cure, of course. We have to work out what's going on. That's a different matter. But there are some other things you can do too. You can we can get a few more of these markers here aligned as well. You can be pretty damn certain that this is more of an issue for you than not. Okay. So look, one of the biggest markers is, the closer your saliva pH is to your urine pH, the smaller the gap. The smaller the gap between your saliva pH and your urine pH. Now remember, saliva pH always needs to be higher than urine pH typically. But as they come closer together, all right, we're holding on to our saliva, which is what we're holding on to our tissues, and our urine, which is what our body's getting rid of. As they come closer together, that's more of an anaerobic environment. There's not much going on. There's not much waste being produced, because otherwise we'd have more acidic urine, because there'd be more waste going out there with your pee. Okay, so the closer we are together, the more anaerobic we are. The further we are away from each other, so if, we've got a high saliva pH and a quite low urine pH, this is more catabolic. It's a strong catabolic marker. Okay, feeling lethargic and tired in the morning, like sluggish to get going. Sort of very lethargic even in the day. You just like lounge around. You don't have much energy. You don't have much energy because you don't have much oxygen. Because your cells are more permeable. Your cells are not permeable enough. Okay. Catabolic insomnia is a very big catabolic marker. Wasting away. Typically, when I'm talking to a catabolic person, they will explain their issues as I feel that my life energy is slowly leaking away. Every day, I don't seem to be getting any further. I'm just my life energy is draining away from me. That's a typical catabolic person. Oh, and a couple of other markers too. Look, an anabolic person, I'll give you some more specific readings. For an anabolic person, will typically have a higher than normal urine pH. I know it sounds a bit strange. I've got acidic tissues and my urine is very alkaline. This is how the body works. Very rarely do we get an alkaline bloodstream and also an alkaline tissues, or acid tissues and acidic blood. It just doesn't happen. They balance each other out. This is why it's very rare for me to see true metabolic acidosis, which is basically systemic acidosis. It just doesn't happen. If it does, the person's probably in hospital because it's a very bad state. So usually when we see alkaline tissues, we'll see acidic urine, or we see acidic tissues, we'll see alkaline urine. They sort of balance out. So anything higher than a urine pH higher than about 6.3 and a lower than normal saliva down by anything less than about 6.6, 6.5. That's an indication that we're pushing more anabolic. A catabolic person, on the other hand, will typically have a more acidic urine pH reading, and that's anything below about 6.1, and a higher than normal saliva pH, which is greater than 6.9. Okay. Once again, it's keeping an eye. But when you take these readings, I guess one of the things I just want to emphasize is don't, I'm all about not just taking one reading and saying, well, that's what it was. Do a few readings over a few days, and you get a bit of a feel for the trend, okay? Because we are fluid, the body changes. One of the things I'll mention with this is potassium to the potassium-sodium ratio will change enormously with the cell membrane permeability issues. I mean, the potassium, sodium, if you went to do a test in the morning, you'd have a different reading than you would if you had in the afternoon. If you had a very anabolic or a very catabolic imbalance, your potassium levels and your sodium levels will be all over the place. One of the things that very few people look at, but I see it all the time. Okay, so look, there's a few things you can get on with. Have a look at getting into some of this testing. Look at some of these markers, and look, I'd love for you to feedback to me how you went. I'd love to get some discussions going. This is especially important, like I said, when we talk about cancer. I pick up a lot of pre-cancerous conditions with my testing, especially with the bloods, and then that's backed up by what I see with the other testing, which I can pick up cell membrane issues and whatnot. So look, I know it's very strong. I know it's very powerful stuff, and I certainly highly recommend that if you haven't done my testing, you want to learn more about what I'm doing. I do also do biohacking training as well, which I'm working on right now. I'm redoing the whole lot. But if you haven't done my testing, do my testing. But at the very least, go home and start doing some of these measurements so that you can get a bit of a feel for where your body's balanced at the moment. Okay, like I said before, it's not about being precise and everything. It's about understanding whether you're in these ranges where there could be a problem. Okay, and it's about minimizing those risks. And as we monitor, this is why it's really important to monitor these things as well. Like just monitoring your pHs, your sugar readings, breath rates, blood pressures and whatnot. It's so powerful because you start to see these patterns, and you start to understand how your body is feeding back to you through biofeedback what's going on. And when you can learn to interpret some of these things, it becomes very, very powerful. Okay, thanks very much for watching the video. I look forward to the next one coming up very soon. Bye.